My hair had to be up for this video because it's very symbolic of my life. Messy and uptight.
Yep, that's me.
Hello beautiful bookish people, my name is Hannah and today I thought it would be fun to just talk about the recent reads that I've been reading.
Because this is BookTube and we just talk about books and what we've recently read.
And some that I've loved, some that I thought were mediocre, and some that I never want to touch with a 10-foot pole ever again. So without further ado, I think we should get started. I'm going to start with the one I don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole so that it can end on a positive note. And that is Breakfast of Champions. I wrote a little note for me to remember because I don't own this book. Thank God. A couple weeks ago I did a video where librarians picked my TBR and one of the librarians loved Kurt Vonnegut. And so she recommended me the quintessential Kurt Vonnegut novel, which was Breakfast of Champions. And upon reading it, I can say with a good and hearty heart,
Kurt Vonnegut is not my guy.
This novel is very difficult to summarize because there's not really a plot. Like there is, but it doesn't matter. Like this whole story is you want these two characters to end up together and like meet, but in a 240-page novel, you're 200 pages in and they haven't met, and you're like, okay, Vonnegut. But by the time you get there, you're so frustrated by it's seemingly unedited word vomit. If there are gonna be like some Kurt Vonnegut stans that are like not gonna like me after this video, it's fine because Breakfast of Champions isn't good. Kurt Vonnegut's thing is he like wants to push the structure of like novel writing, meaning he doesn't like the traditional format of how we write a book. But the thing is, if you're gonna break that structure, you kind of have to have something interesting to say. And like, sure, does Kurt Vonnegut have interesting thoughts? Yeah, you can find little nuggets in this book that are like meaningful, but just like you can't make a fire from a couple sparks, you can't make a good book with a couple good thoughts. It just felt like a 50-year-old guy putting down all of his thoughts on a Word document and then not editing them to make any sense. And also I heard that Kurt Vonnegut wrote himself into the story, and there's this pretentious writer character, and I thought that's who people were talking about when they said Kurt Vonnegut wrote himself into the story. But no, he actually writes himself, Kurt Vonnegut, into the story to kind of debate this other pretentious writer. And I'm like, if you're gonna do this, if you're gonna be non-linear and like do your Kurt Vonnegut thing, then at least have something interesting to say, because they didn't talk about anything. Like if you're gonna do this and self-impose yourself as a character and create yourself as a god, then like maybe have something interesting to say. And that's extremely frustrating because sure, this book could have been really good if just a little more thought went behind what he was trying to say. Sorry, I guess I've been holding in that rage and frustration for a long time, so tagline for Breakfast of Champions: it ain't it, chief. So the next book I kind of want to talk about is Again But Better by Christine Riccio. Firstly, look at that. Barnes & Noble, I really need you to get better at sticker removal, because this is extremely frustrating. I actually met Christine at the Dallas stop, and she's so incredibly sweet and nice and seems like a great person. And Again But Better tells the story of Shane, who is going on this study abroad program that doesn't apply to her medical degree because she's more passionate about writing. But unfortunately this book felt a little short in my opinion, and I've been trying to grapple with why, because like everything in the summary and about it would work for me. Like, I love contemporary, I love going and study abroad programs, and like cutesy romances. I think I've boiled it down to it was very hard to get lost in this book for me, where I kept noticing these like little nitpicky things about it, where like a lot of the sentences started with I, or there was a fragment and all that stuff, and I'm not the type of person to notice these things. But if I'm keep getting pulled out of the story and noticing these like little things, then it's gonna knock my enjoyment of it, I think. And also my friend Nikki pointed out how it's a lot more tell not show, and I agree with that. But I think the reason is, like, I know Christine went to school for script writing, and I honestly feel like if this was a script and if this was a movie, it would work a million times better, because Christine tries to do these things that would work perfectly for a movie or like a montage moment, but if we're putting it under like a book terms and what we expect when we're reading a book, it diminishes what it's trying to do. So like there's this moment where Shane like loses her credit card and she's really upset about it, and the love interest is like comforting her and they have like a nice moment, and then the next day they are traveling in Rome and doing all this stuff, but we don't actually see Rome. We hear about it from these journal entries, but we never see it. We're never described the Vatican, and apparently Shane met the Pope, and we just hear about it in our journals later. But if this were a movie, that would be a great building moment for these two characters, and then you would transition into a montage moment of just living in Rome. But like in a book,
It doesn't necessarily work.
there's all these like just these little things that took away like just a slight enjoyment from it. So I gave this book 3 stars. So yes, 3 stars. I liked it. Wasn't a new favorite, but I will continue to support Christine because she's great and a sweetheart, and we love her. I have another note, because the next book I want to talk about I also don't own, and that book is called Every Heart a Doorway. I read this on the plane ride to BookCon, all in basically one flight, which is really impressive for me because I am a slow reader. And then immediately took it to the BookTube meetup to trade it because I knew I didn't want to read it again. So if you don't know what Every Heart a Doorway is about, it's a portal fantasy where these kids come back from magical lands and have to kind of readjust to reality and our rules and stuff like that. So I guess my only thing about Every Heart a Doorway is every time I kept getting my footing in what was happening, we would change into a new topic. And I think that's my fault because I didn't realize that this was a novella and not like just a short book. But every time I would get my footing in, okay, we're readjusting to this magical land, and then boom, a murder mystery is thrown on me, and then like we're solving this, and then boom, the story's over. And I just never felt comfortable enough to get my footing in the world. I think I really wanted more nuance and just more conversation about like what makes a home. Like it just felt like everything was kind of brushed under the rug. I just wanted Shauna McGuire to like talk about it more, because I think that's an extremely interesting conversation of like what makes a home. And also Shauna McGuire threw some shade towards C.S. Lewis in this book. Whoa. And I was not having it. Do not come after Narnia. That is my childhood. She was like, oh yeah, it's not a portal fantasy. That's not a world that we can go into because it's just an allegory for Christianity. And like, okay, but also rude. I ended up giving Every Heart a Doorway 3 stars just because like I love the world, I love the ideas, I just wanted more.
Lisa, I want some more.
And the last book I want to talk about, I have another note because I also don't own this book. is Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. So if you don't know, John Green and I have had kind of a bumpy road. I wasn't the biggest fan of Paper Towns or Looking for Alaska, or even back in 2012 when I would say the renaissance of YA was happening. The Fault in Our Stars came out.
And I read it and I was like, this is okay.
So I kind of went into Turtles All the Way Down a little wary, and I lowered my expectations, and come to find out, I love it. So it's about this girl named Asa and her friend Daisy as they try to reconnect with one of their childhood friends who is the son of a billionaire who has gone missing. And there is a reward out that if anybody has information about this millionaire, they will be rewarded $100,000. And so, but that is kind of the subplot to the more major plot, which is Asa's mental health. And I know that John Green has said that this is very like own voices for him, and it feels so real, and I think that's because of John Green's own voice behind it, because it's very raw, it's very realistic. I would say if you're going through a down phase in your mental health, I wouldn't pick it up necessarily, because it is very daunting, especially for me, who's someone who doesn't suffer from like anxiety or OCD. I think when we read, obviously one of the upsides is feeling more empathetic towards people. As someone who doesn't have OCD or anxiety, it felt very eye-opening to see and get told through the eyes of Asa, like, this is what it's like, this is what it's like on a day-to-day. And Turtles All the Way Down is very good about getting to the nitty-gritty. It's never romanticized or glamorized. It's very, all I can say is like raw. I don't know how, but I feel like John has captured the feeling of going through one of these panic attacks or anxiety moments, and it's sometimes hard to read, because sometimes when I was reading it, my heart would start beating, and I'm like, Hannah, you're fine. This is just a book, you know. But I'm very happy to have read it, because I do feel like my eyes have been like open to a little more of the journey that some people have to go through. That's the glory of reading, you know what I mean? And I haven't had that feeling in a long time, so it feels kind of weird and good to have it from a John Green novel, just because in the past we have not been that type. So in conclusion, we have learned that it's always good to give authors a couple chances if you feel like it. Kurt Vonnegut is the worst, and if you meet the Pope, tell me about it. So thank you for watching. That concludes this video, so I'll see you next time. Keep reading and all that jazz. I never want to touch with a 10-foot pole ever again. And something I never want to touch with a 10-foot pole. Goodness gracious. Shh. I feel like I'm going to get some shade from Kurt Vonnegut fans, but I don't care. This book was not good. And personally, I don't like the term homewrecker. I don't agree with that when you're applying it to this book. Bye bye.